Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to the most spectacular game from the TCEC Season 27 Cup Finals between the two top engines Stockfish 17 and LCZero. As we mentioned in our previous video, Stockfish won the event with 1 point more than LCZero. It was really a tough battle. Leela also played awesome chess, but Stockfish was slightly better and is now the deserved winner of a new TCEC competition. And we're diving now into this game. This game has an incredible, really an immortal endgame idea where Stockfish will play with a Rook against two knights on the board. A really crazy position that Stockfish provoked with an immediate bishop sacrifice in the early stage of the game. So the game was stretched all over the board, so put your seatbelts on and enjoy in the wildest game from this TCEC Season 27 Cup Finals between the two top engines. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces. The fish opened with the move e4, e6 by Leela, the French, d4, d5, knight to c3, Winawer variation after move bishop to b4. We have now the advanced variation, and now after knight to e7, Stockfish challenges now the bishop. Leela trades it off, creates now a double pawn structure, of course, which is a strategic disadvantage, creates also, I would say, a weak square in white's position, the weak square in c4, but Stockfish continues, of course, with a beautiful bishop pair on the board, has a great activity with the bishop, can, of course, maybe also launch an early flank attack on this side of the board. Here, Leela continued with b6. We have now queen to g4 and now king to f8. And this was now the last move that was prearranged by the organizer. From this point on, the engines are calculating the position for themselves. So after king to f8, we have to mention the position is better for white, but so far Stockfish didn't evaluate any of these moves by black a mistake. We have seen many great games also in top grandmaster level in the same position. For instance, Anish Giri versus Fabiano Caruana. Caruana won the game. Then Aronian versus Caruana. Aronian won the game. But I think it's still a playable position. Maybe not in top AI level, but in human level, many great games, as I said, has been also played with the black pieces, especially because one strategic idea that black will always try to do, and that's a move bishop to a6. Black can in some lines easily get rid of the bishop pair of white, so it's, I think, a normal concept of blacks against this types of position. And then white would continue the game with the slightly bad piece here, the bishop on c1, because too many pawns are on dark squares, and of course a dark square bishop doesn't like this types of position because it doesn't have such a mobility. The pawns are blocking out, of course, the bishop's activity. So as I said, complicated position to play for both sides. Let's see now how Stockfish continued after king to f8. Stockfish first of all plays now the move a4. The idea about this move a4 is after potential bishop to a6 immediately to play maybe even in some lines bishop to b5 is a possibility, or maybe bishop to a6 immediately. Leela didn't play bishop to a6 in the beginning because after knight to a6, maybe our knight to e2, white would then have a great attack with the possibility of knight to g3, maybe then f4, f5, creating, of course, some attacks here, maybe even with kingside castling, and black would have still maybe a tough time to reroute the knight on a more active square, maybe to b8 and then afterwards to d7, because even in this line, the knight of blacks is a little bit out. It cannot jump on b4, it cannot also jump to c5. So that's why from move a4 by the fish, Leela continued with the normal plan c5. Also a natural idea by black to crack, of course, the space advantage, because white has, of course, this powerful chain in the center of the board. So here Leela is trying to disconnect now the pawns. We have now bishop to b5 and now a6, bishop to d7, a5. Again, LCZero wants to apply the same method, but now maybe to grab also here this bishop after bishop to a6, maybe also to grab it with the rook and then continue with knight to d7, because in this previous line black will lose simply too much time with the knight in order to get the piece back. So here Stockfish continues with normal development. Now comes this idea, and now d takes c5, b takes c5, and now rook to b1. Stockfish is targeting now here the weakness on b5. Black, on the other hand, should not play c4 here. Seems tempting, but then after bishop to e2, there are again new weaknesses in black's position. Knight to d4 would happen. The bishop will eventually get into the game. We can maybe reroute it here, so this wouldn't be, of course, also good continuation, because then finally the light square bishop of blacks is simply also out of game. So that's why for rook to b1, we have now bishop to d3, c takes d3. Now Leela got rid of the bishop pair that white has as a main strategic advantage in the opening stage, but now Stockfish has also disconnected this double pawns. Now Stockfish again has at least a healthy pawn structure and can continue now the game with a good bishop here on c1. We have king to g8, castling by the fish, and now h6. Here Leela is trying to play king to h7 and then castling by hand, create of course somehow a good defensive position for the king, and then finally activate this knight maybe to c6, maybe to d7, and then eventually compete on the only open file on the b file. We have now rook to b5, Stockfish occupies immediately here the spaces, knight to d7, and now c4, king to h7, rook to e1. Good move here by the fish. Interesting stuff. Stockfish with this move rook to e1 always thinks about potential rook lifts. For instance, in a line after d takes c4, there's always the possibility that the rook could be included into the game. This move is very important. Many of us maybe wouldn't play this move. Maybe we would consider just in order to protect this pawn on e5, but actually Stockfish is trying to do very active play with this rook, not only defend one pawn here that's advanced in white's position. We have now rook to e8 here by Leela c0, and now queen to h5, hitting now the weakness on f7. And now things are getting more and more complicated. Let's see options how black could defend this position around the square f7. So if you try rook to f8, this wasn't played in the game. I wanted to show you now what was actually Stockfish's idea here. Bishop to g5 would be then the continuation by white. Then after something like d takes c4, d takes c4, and king to g8, now comes this idea with h4, rook to b8, and now rook to e4. As we mentioned, Stockfish will try then to play with the rook on the g file and would have, I think, enormous pressure. So I'm not saying this completely busted or something, but you see, really unpleasant, I think, to play the game from black's perspective. So many pieces are dancing in front of you, and also we have to say it's Stockfish locked out now the b file. And even if you trade off here rook to b5, then after c takes b5 or a takes b5, you have created also beautiful strategic advantage when it comes to endgames. It's of course the supported pass pawn in a potential fully endgame stage. For instance, in this position, when the pieces are off the board, with the queens off the board, again white would have a favorable endgame because of the healthier pawn structure. So that's what I mean. Really interesting stuff. So that's why for queen to h5, Leela didn't play rook to f8. Leela tried now to move king to g8, but now Stockfish plays immediately a beautiful sacrifice with bishop to h6. Really crazy stuff. After g takes h6, Stockfish doesn't take the pawn on h6 immediately, plays now beautiful the c takes d5. And the issue for black is here that you cannot take with the pawn. That's now what Stockfish realized in this position. This mobility of the pawn should not be allowed. So for instance, if you try e takes d5, then e6 is breaking through. You're trying to maybe take, then look at this, rook to e6 coming, you're trying maybe to attack, then in some lines maybe white can sacrifice now here the rook for two knights will get the queen finally into the game. I'm not saying white and black have to play the game like this in this potential line, but I wanted to show you that the black's king is really naked. I've analyzed a little bit further this position. Rook to b7, then rook to e7, then you deliver further checks. If black tries to escape, then you deliver something like this, and in a potential line, you could also lose the rook here on the back rank. The issue is, as I said, after e takes d5, you get e6, and the position is almost collapsing here for black. So this is not working. So that's why for c takes d5, Leela took now with the knight, keeps now at least a firm structure in the center of the board. It's not allowing this pawn mobility, but now Stockfish finally plays king to h6. Really important move order that Stockfish played. Now the knight is deflected from, of course, the defense of the king. Really amazing stuff. Leela continues with f5. Stockfish delivers some checks, repeated moves, and now included the knight into the game. The threat is, of course, knight to f7, the royal fork against the queen and the king. Rook to e7, Stockfish delivers a check again, and now finally knight to f7, rook takes f7, queen to f7, and Stockfish has gained now here to the rook for lost two minor pieces. Leela has to now finally simplify the game by by trading off the queens, which is pretty solid. We have queen takes e7, knight takes e7, and now rook to b7. Leela defends the knight. Stockfish fixes now the pawn here on e5, and after knight to d5, Stockfish fixes again the structure here on the king side. Knight to b6. Stockfish is threatening now. Of course, to again to trap now both of these knights for the lost rook. We have now knight takes a4, and now Stockfish makes a huge decision with rook to b8. Really crazy. Stockfish from this move, let's see, from this move bishop to h6, which was in move 20, really forced, I think, here a tactical sequence. I didn't see any better solutions here for Leela LCZero. Leela was really forced to play only defensive moves now after this. Let's see, after this trade of rooks here on the back rank. Stockfish went into this endgame where Stockfish has now the rook against two knights. And what's the most important part to say, Leela still has a passer on the a file, which could be very dangerous. And now the real beautiful but also brutal endgame starts now between these two most powerful chess engines in the world. Here Leela tried king to g7, of course, moving the king towards here the center of the board. Stockfish tries rook to b5, attacks now both of these pawns. Leela plays now knight to b6, and now the first really important decision here in this endgame. Stockfish played now first of all rook to c5 instead of rook to a5. If rook to a5 would have happened, then Leela LCZero could simplify the game too much with the potential c4 move. Then after d takes c4, knight to c4, and maybe knight to b6. Black would have again a solid position, would connect two knights, would eventually get the king closer, and I'm not sure if white would win this endgame here in this particular position. So instead of rook to a5, Stockfish took now the pawn on c5, created here Leela LCZero a passer, so Leela still can keep now the pawn on the a file, but Stockfish is saying, I'll at least have also my pawn here in the center of the board. I'll try to do something, maybe in some lines. Finally, if the position is allowing, maybe push the pawn on d5. We have now a4 by Leela. Stockfish attacks now the knight. You cannot push the pawn further because rook to a5, then we'll simply grab it. You don't have access to the c4 square because of the pawn on d3. So you see, with this tactical ideas, Stockfish is not allowing here any progress of the pawn. So that's why after rook to b5, Leela tried king to f7, and now Stockfish is of course using this king in the endgame stage. King to f3, king to h5, and now h3, which is not allowing Black's king to get closer into the attack, and also is preparing in some lines the move g4. We have now king to h6, and now g4 here immediately would be a little bit risky. Seems tempting. Many of us would play this move, but then after king to g6, Black would simply wait here, would simply repeat now moves with the knight, and even if you get the king rook maybe on the 7th rank and you go into this line, you cannot eventually push the pawn. That's the issue, because Black's king will be close enough to the action and will defend the potential promotion. So the pawn mobility here on the king side is an idea, is a possibility, but not immediately. It should be played later when maybe there is an improvement of white's pieces. And what can you improve? You can, of course, improve just the rook, and you can, of course, improve just the king. So that's why Stockfish, first of all, played rook to a5 instead of this move g4, and now a rook to a7, cutting off any activity by Black's king. We have now king to h5, rook to a6, and now Stockfish is trying to improve, first of all, the activity of the king now again, because g4 is a possibility, but we're waiting with it when the time is right. We have now king to g6, king to d2, we have now king to h6, and Stockfish is now getting on the score c1. You cannot, of course, get to c2 because you could get the fork here with the knight on b4. King comes closer, Stockfish again activates the king further, king to h5, and now rook to a7. King to g6, Stockfish attacks now the knight. Again, Leela is trying to repeat moves, is hoping now to get some kind of a draw here, but now a rook to b8, which is now quite a provocative move here by the fish. It's almost inviting here maybe Black to play the move knight to d7, but this wouldn't be working because then you could cut off here the activity of the knights, and then when the rook is coming here on this square, also what Leela LCZero has to take care of is now the weakness on e6. So That's why Leela C0 after rook to b8 tried king to h6, at least not allowing this pawn to be attacked. Even if you tried now, then of course knight to c7 could happen. You're trying maybe to attack the knight, but it's a different story. Again, Leela C0 could build a defensive setup here with this idea. So again, nothing gained now by white. And actually also we have to notice now finally the rook is even trapped here, doesn't have such a great activity here on the 7th rank. So that's why after rook to b8 and king to h6, Stockfish didn't go for this pawn on e6. Stockfish played now calm h4, which is very, very interesting choice here. This move h4 is actually not allowing here Leela C0, sorry, to play the move king to h5 here, because if that happens, then Stockfish would have this one. Rook to h8, and even if you try to get the king closer to the action, now h5, and there's nothing that can be done. The knights are simply too far away from the action. Stockfish will eventually promote this pawn, and it could be, of course, game over here for Leela. So really interesting stuff, this move h4. Great move. I really expected the move g4 to happen. Stockfish advances now this pass around the h file and is stretching now the position. There is this always the certain idea when you play against knights. You should always try to create distant outside pass pawns, the pass pawns on the edge of the board, and that's exactly what Stockfish is doing, because the knights don't like to play against this pawn because they're really, really hard to attack. Very great move here by Stockfish, the move h4, king to g6 by Leela, rook king to a3. Now again Leela repeats moves, and now first of all the check. We have now king to g7, rook to e8. Now comes this idea to attack the pawn. Leela gets now the king closer, because after knight to c7 you get rook to e7. That's now the issue. Now it's a little bit different when Stockfish decoyed the king to the 7th rank. Now this attack against this pawn that previously didn't work, now it's working because the pieces are lined up and black could be losing a piece. So here after rook to e8, king to f7. Now Stockfish plays again rook to b8 and is trying now to simply push the pawn further. Stockfish is playing tiny little maneuvers with the rook. When the king is exposed here, then again the pawn mobility is possible here on the h file. We have now king to g6. Stockfish plays now king to b2. A beautiful Zugzwang move. Stockfish is waiting here. Leela C0 to make a move. You cannot move, of course, this knight because you lose this one. So that's why here knight to d7 was played by Leela C0. And that's the beauty about this move, king to b2. This was, in my opinion, even the most beautiful move of this game, because this move is forcing basically this knight from b6 to move somewhere. If you push the pawn, of course, you lose the pawn. If you, for instance, move the king here, then the issue is finally white will start to push the pawn here. And if you try something like king to h6, look at this, rook to h8, king to g7. Now again, this idea to attack the pawn, you're trying to get the king closer, but now h6 is even working. That's the issue. If you pick up the rook here, then the move h7 will happen, and the game is over here for black. Even if you try, instead of king to f7, maybe here to play the move knight to c7, again you get the same tactic that we have discussed earlier with rook to e7. So beautiful, beautiful move here by Stockfish, waiting now Leela C0 to make a move. You cannot move the knight from the d file, you cannot move the king as we saw, and Leela C0 was forced now to play the move knight to d7. Stockfish delivers a check, king to f7. Now Stockfish cuts off again here, maybe the move knight to c5, knight to b4 by Leela, and now Stockfish simply finally advances the pawn. Knight to b6, rook to c7, king to g6, and now king to a3, going simply for the pawn on a4. Leela C0 has to now connect everything, attacks now the rook, and now rook to c4 here by the fish. Now see, with this maneuver, Stockfish somehow created some kind of an unbalanced position. Now Stockfish is closer with the king, the rook is more active, black is still stuck here on the king side. Leela tried knight to d3, Stockfish attacks now again this pawn. Leela is forced again to defend it with king to f7. Again, Leela C0's king is now even further from the action with this move. Now Stockfish advances the pawn. Very, very great move. We have now knight to b4, and now again a new attack against this knight, knight to a6, and now a beautiful, beautiful move here by the fish, king takes a4. Great move. Leela C0 actually cannot take out the rook now, because after d takes c5, as we mentioned, the position is simply too stretched. There's simply too much distance between these two pawns, the pawn on the c file and also on the h file. Black could maybe try to finally go for this pawn, but it's not working. Once this pawn is lost on e6, then the game is over. You could maybe, of course, grab some pawns here, but now the position is collapsing here. Black is forced now to give up here the piece for the pawn, and in the potential sequence like this, look at this. I've analyzed this endgame further. Then you simply play king to f1, queen to f1, and here we'll get the king closer, and game over here for black. Here maybe instead of this move f2, you can maybe try king to g2, but again it's not working because of this line. Even if you try to push the pawn now, queen to h1 holds everything, and you don't have access to the f1 square. So again, game over here for black. So king takes a4, really great move. Is not allowing this move knight takes c5 to happen. Really crazy endgame technique here by the fish. So that's why knight to c7. Stockfish advances the rook. Leela is trying to go for this pawn on h5. Stockfish improves again the position of the king, and Stockfish found a beautiful path again for the king. Simply attacks now both of these knights and is hoping finally to get the pawn on e6. We have now king to g3 by Leela. Stockfish took, rook takes c7, and suddenly the position is collapsing. You cannot even play knight takes c7 here, because after king to c7, this one is coming. You have to now give up here a clear path for the e pawn. You can maybe just try to push your own pawns, but once the queen is coming to e2, again, it's completely lost position here for black. After rook to c7, what should you do? Even if you try king to f4 here, then rook to c5, you're trying to do something like this. This pawn is marching. Again, game over here for black. After rook to c7, Leela tried king to f3, but nothing is really working. Stockfish grabs now the most important pawn, the pawn on e6. Leela is trying to battle. Again, Stockfish pushes the pawn further. Leela tries to escape, but after knight takes e7, rook to e7, in this particular position, Leela c0 resign. What can you do? If you play, of course, king to d4, the king is out of game. Stockfish would simply go for this one, and nothing can be done. Even if you go for this one, of course, here on f4, then we simply march with this one. In one moment, we give up, of course, the rook for pawn, or probably white will even promote earlier in this position. So again, game over here for Leela c0. So incredible game. Risky stuff in the beginning. First of all, this amazing bishop sacrifice, and then going into rook versus 2 knight endgame. Really amazing calculations, I would say, because it seemed to me in the beginning that Stockfish had everything under control. My Stockfish engine at home always evaluated the position as much better for white, even though maybe in human level someone could defend this position with the black pieces, but Stockfish is a different monster. Played here really one of the greatest chess endgames that I've seen in my life. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Winawer French here by both sides. If you want to see some other beautiful, spectacular, sharp tactical games like this, check out our Competent Chess Games Played by Computers. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.